afternoon and welcome to this special Tribeca Festival edition of My Harlem Portraits, the show that aims at shedding the light on the fundamental contribution of African Americans to the building of this country and on Black excellence. To talk about Black excellence today, we are gonna present a documentary, the Lorraine, having its world premiere in the Spotlight documentary section at Tribeca Festival 2026 with awards-winning director Sam Pollard and writer and executive producer Alvin Hall. Welcome to My Harlem Portraits.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be on, Ray.
I have to start with congratulating with Mr. Sam Pollard, who just recently received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Documentary Emmys here in New York.
Thank you.
Congratulations. How does it feel? Because you definitely deserve that.
It felt great to be in the room with a bunch of friends and colleagues, people I've known for many, many years, to have my close colleague and very, very close friend, Geeta Gandabir, do my introduction. It was one of those times where I enjoyed the experience a lot. I really had a good time.
Fantastic. I'm so happy we can, say that here during this introduction and conversation. So you are an award-winning, renowned documentarian, filmmaker, editor, and director. And I'm just talking about the last year, and 2025 executive producer on the Netflix series Katrina, Come Hell and High Water, and EP on the Oscar-nominated The Perfect Neighbor. You, Mr. Alvin Hall, are a best-selling author, an award-winning broadcaster, television, radio, and podcasting, financial educator, and storyteller. How did you two meet and decide to collaborate to make this incredible documentary with this precious archival footage, music, and interviews with those who lived it? It's very important and a very relatively unknown story.
Well, the story starts.
Well, I'm going to let Alvin pick it up because he started. Go ahead, Alvin.
The story started in 2015, 2016, when the BBC commissioned me to do a program about the Green Book, the Negro Motorist Green Book. And for that program, we followed the historical civil rights route through Montgomery, Jackson, and of course to Memphis, Tennessee. During the production of that program, the producer and I interviewed Carolyn Bailey Champion, the daughter of Walter and Loree Bailey. And it was at that point that she told the story about her mother having the cerebral embolism on the night that Martin Luther King was assassinated at the hotel. Her mother then died on the day of the funeral. Yeah. Then in 2019, I did a road trip from Detroit to New Orleans to record a podcast called Driving the Green Book. And this was to look at people who had used the Negro Motorist Green Book, who patronized those businesses. And what business was in this trip? The Lorraine Motel. And it was during that trip that I interviewed Dr. Noelle Trent, who is in the documentary. And she told us the story about the music written at the motel, Wait Till the Midnight Hour, Knocked on Wood, and a lot more. And it was at that point I said, there's a great story here. And there's more to this story than meets the eye. And I didn't know all of these things. And I thought, if I didn't know all of these things, most of the world does not. Yeah. So we should try to turn this into a film. Many months later, I met one of the producers of this film, Joe Wemple, and he introduced me to Dan Braun, and Dan Braun signed on, and then we pursued Sam.
Sam,
I met Alvin and Joe Wemple. I met Alvin and Joe Wemple at a screening of my Max Roach documentary, and we talked about the Lorraine, and I was on board immediately. And then, as you know, Maria, you have to raise the money to get these things off the ground. And Joe Wimple and Alvin particularly was very good at fundraising to get this film off the ground, from pre-production to production to post-production. And I guess about 2 years ago, we started shooting in Memphis, and Alvin had done a tremendous amount of research at the Schomburg. He introduced me to a bunch of different books about segregation at that time in hotels like Lorraine where people had to stay, if you're African American. And then he came with a wonderful list of people, contributors who are in the documentary: Dr. Noel Trent, Ryan Jones, Mary Ellen Ford, the Miss Bailey, Miss Bailey, who's the daughter of
Yes.
Walter and Loree Bailey, and her daughter, a wonderful group of people. And we did 3 shoots in Memphis and to tell this story, not only about the history of Lorraine before Dr. King's assassination, but what happened to Lorraine after the assassination, where it became the National Civil Rights Museum. And also to look at the musical history and the social and cultural history of Memphis, Tennessee.
Yes, it was something also, as you said, the Lorraine was famous because Martin Luther King was assassinated there, but it wasn't known for anything else. And you discovered a lot of very important things. On April 4th, as we were saying, 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated on the balcony of room 306 at the LORRAINE Motel in Tennessee. And this was a very dark and horrific watershed moment for the civil rights movements and for the nation. And it also changed the trajectory of a Lorraine existence as well. And your story is about the before and the after the assassination. So tell us a little bit what the owners, Walter and Loree Bailey, meant for the city and its community before and after, and the people who are the people
Well,
interviewed.
Well, before 68, April 4th, they were a couple, a wonderful couple who had a dream to have their own hotel slash motel, and they were able to make it happen, and they had people like, Duke Ellington, like Aretha Franklin, like Satchel Paige or Jackie Robinson, people who were celebrities who were African American who couldn't stay at white hotels. And when they were in Memphis, they stayed at the Lorraine, and Lorraine became a hub. We have this wonderful footage of the Harlem Globetrotters who stayed at the Lorraine Motel. You got B.B. King, and you got Otis Redding, you got all these wonderful people. And we were able to interview Eddie Floyd, who wrote with Steve Cropper his song "Knock on Wood" at the Lorraine
Yes.
Motel. And one of the wonderful stories is about Isaac Hayes coming to the hotel and not wanting his wife to know, and swimming in the pool. Those are great stories. And that's what we're telling you. Not only this wonderful, rich history, but the humor, the sadness, the tragedy also accompany staying at this hotel. And then after Dr. King's assassination, Mr. Bailey lost his wife,
Yes.
tragically on the day of Dr. King's funeral. And the hotel became, a place where people didn't want to go anymore because it had this stigma where King was
Yeah.
assassinated. But this wonderful gentleman named Loree Bailey had the idea that he wanted to turn it into something special. And he was able to buy the hotel with some other gentlemen, investors, and they were able to bring on architects and rebuild that hotel and turn it into the National Civil Rights Museum, where I went with my family doing a reunion in the 90s. I guess the mid 90s. And so it's a special place. So when Alvin and I and the crew were there in 2024 to do our first shoot, to just walk into that place, it's like a holy space. It's a
Wow.
really holy space. And then to sit and interview, our first interview was with a gentleman named Russell Wigington in front of the room 306 where King slept, and right outside where he was assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so special. And then on the intercom, they're playing the music Ben Branch, a saxophonist, did.
Wow.
He performed Precious Lord. It's an extraordinary place, extraordinary experience.
I have to go there. You made me
You
want to go
should. You
there.
should definitely go.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Mr. Hall.
And Alvin, yeah, Alvin, talk about some of the people that you were able to reach out to for us to interview.
Oh, we reached out to Carol Loree Champion, who is the granddaughter of the Baileys. We reached out to Adrienne Bailey, the wife of DeArmie Bailey. We reached out to Jesse Turner Jr., who owned whose father was the president of this Black-owned Tri-State Bank.
Mm.
We reached out to Carla Thomas. We reached out to Eddie Floyd, Steve Cropper, Andrew Young in
Yes.
Atlanta,
Mm.
Obie Smith, who started a group that was sort of an offshoot of the Black Panthers called the Invaders in Memphis. We got the whole spectrum of people who lived there. And we reached out to Mary Ellen Norwood Ford, who was a housekeeper at the motel
Yes.
both before uh, the assassination, on the day of the assassination, and then for years afterwards. We found her. She lives in Lansing, Michigan. You know, these were the type of people whose stories were still alive and still vivid for them that Sam was able to capture in this film.
And it's fantastic because it gives you the history, but it gives it to you in a very delightful way before the tragedy happens. This is a place that really created a community. And tell us a little bit about the Green Book, because not everybody knows what the Green Book is and why the Lorraine was in the Green Book.
The Green Book was founded in 1936 by Walter, what's so funny, I should say Walter, by Victor Hugo Green and his wife Alma. Victor Hugo Green was a postman who lived in New York but had a route in Hackensack, New Jersey, and he and his wife would drive south to visit her parents in Richmond, Virginia during the summer. And along the way, he would experience what he called aggravations. He could not buy gas, he could not sleep anywhere or rest. So he, canvassing his friends in New England, created the Negro Motorist Green Book as a place, as a guide for people, Black people, to find the services that they wanted on the road. It started out in New England, and then over the course of time, it spread across America. And the Lorraine Motel was one of the places that was listed in it as one of the premier places. In every town and city across America, there was a place, especially in towns and cities that were a part of the entertainment circuit called the Chitlin Circuit. They had some of the best hotels in America for African Americans to stay. And the Lorraine Motel was one of them.
And there is a very, very famous film also that was made about the Green Book
Yes, it was.
few
And
years ago.
yeah,
Beautiful. Not
and
so long
I
ago.
talk about that film in my book, which is called Driving the Green Book. But that film was much more of a buddy movie
Hmm.
about the relationship between the piano player and his
Yeah.
chauffeur. A movie about the Green Book would have looked at the people in those communities. And remember, the Green Book continued to be published all the way until 1967.
Yes.
Victor Hugo Green said he hoped there would come a day when that publication was no longer needed. And he thought the passing of the National Civil Rights Act was that event that would eliminate the need for the Green Book when public accommodations were no longer segregated.
Well, we are not there yet. I mean,
Mhm.
we're not segregated, but we are going back 50 years. They are trying to take us back 50 years in every way they can. So this is very bad. And the way I love the way you start the movie, because it starts saying that the importance of Tennessee, intersection north-south, east-west of the Great Migration and the cotton trade on the Mississippi, but the segregation was very strong. Then someone says it's a society within a society.
Yeah.
Someone else says a black city
Right.
posing as a white city based on black
Right.
creativity,
Yep.
ingenuity, culture, music, but they only want to talk about Elvis. I
Yeah.
love that. I love
That's
that.
right.
Tell us
That's a great
how.
line. That's a great line, Ray. That's a great line.
It's a fantastic line. It's amazing. You know, your movies have many great lines. That's why I love it, because they come out and then they stay with me.
Yeah.
And this was a safe haven. Tell us how was it to film in Tennessee and knowing that you were filming about this motel when you were talking to people there?
Oh, it was great. I've been to Memphis many times. I have family in Memphis. So, going to the South, for a Black person is always complicated
Yeah.
because most of us have family in the South that brings that strong connection. But
Yeah.
you also always understand within your bones the remnants of segregation in the South. So you always feel, oh yeah, this is the South. It's got its good, it's got its bad. It's got Richard Wright, it's got William Faulkner. It's got so many different things. So Memphis to me, I enjoyed myself because one of the first things I did when I got to Memphis after we spent a couple of days shooting, I called my cousin and we had dinner on Beale Street at some
Oh,
little restaurant, you know. And it was just great for me to be there, but to be out there shooting, interviewing people like Noel Trent or Ryan Jones or Mary Ford or, you know, um,
Adrian
Eddie
Bailey.
Floyd, just Adrian Bailey, just a wonderful experience. It's always, listen, I personally think I got one of the best jobs in the world to be
yes.
able to sit with people and talk about history, talk about their personal lives, welded to that history, and then to present it to the world. I have one of the best jobs in the world. I'm a blessed human being.
I love it. I love what you're saying because it's the truth. Whoever is
Yeah,
able to make a living out of doing what they like and what they love is blessed.
Yes.
blessed. Absolutely.
Not everybody can do that. Another
Nope.
thing that was very interesting in the movie is that the Lorraine started because 1938 African American newspapers were the narrated and handed out by sleeping car porters and train porters. They needed a place to stay and tell us how Walter and Loree started because they started with 2 rooms that they were renting out.
Yes,
Go
they
ahead,
started
Alan.
by buying a rooming house in Memphis. And it was very near the train station. And I think they chose that rooming house in part because they had regular income coming from the porters who would stay overnight. In the movie, we found a recording of Walter Bailey saying that we rented out the rooms for 75 cents an hour. And
Wow.
that, yes, can you believe? And then he said, if there was so much demand that we needed a bigger place.
Yes.
So I always feel as we could expand the story and learn more and more, that their story of moving up, seeking to provide higher quality services for their customer base and people who visited Memphis is really a representation of that statement, a rising tide raises all boats.
Yeah.
Because as they improved, they helped the whole community improve. People would visit them and see what first class accommodations felt like, what great food felt like, what other people they would meet at this place that would give them a lift and inspire them to do better. I think the Bailey story, as they then bought the place on Mulberry Street to expand to become a larger place, talks about that rising tide. But then when the Civil Rights Act was passed, he became concerned. He
Yes.
wasn't sure he would survive once segregation in public accommodations was removed. But his wife agreed and said, if you think we should, and just think about that, they didn't have access to a lot of capital. So more than likely, we haven't been able to find anything to support this. They probably got a loan from the Black owned Tri-State Bank. And they expanded the hotel by putting in the equivalent of $2.5 million today and built the part of the hotel that we now know well.
Mm.
Even in the face of changing legislation, they remained hopeful, the two of them. They were really a partnership, just as their granddaughter, Carol Loree Bailey, champion says.
They were a partnership and they were both taking risks.
Yes, they were very much risk takers.
Yes.
And they saw the risk taking as the only way to really make progress. Granted, it was a calculated risk, but they knew that in order to move forward, you had to invest in yourself and invest in your dreams and then work hard to make them happen. And in order to make sure that his family had financial security, Walter Bailey also had a second job as
Yes,
manager of the porters and bellhops at the Holiday Inn.
exactly. And that's what it's very interesting because in the 60s, you say the Holiday Inn happens and then everything changed again. But they found a way of surviving and thriving, even though they opened, now there was a possibility for Black people to stay in other hotels. They still
Yeah.
were able to keep their clientele, and they built a swimming pool also, where
Yes.
everybody was coming and having fun. Then there was another part that is very important. We have 5 minutes left. Very
Mhm.
important to talk about because when Martin Luther King came to the Lorraine, it was because of the sanitation workers were on strike in Memphis. He was coming to support the strike. And you talk about this. So that's another very important thing because your movie is a movie about a hotel, but it's a history of Black civil rights in America. So tell us a little bit about that moment, the sanitation workers and what happened.
Go for it, Alvin. I'm gonna let you run with it.
Okay, so he came there first and saw that there had been a great response to him. This was before he came, I think it was in 64. He came and he saw that there was a force in Memphis, that there was some movement going there. As he says in the film, something is happening in Memphis, something is happening across the nation. But in Memphis, the focus on the sanitation workers' strike meant that there was a lot of momentum. What most people forget was that the sanitation workers were the brothers and the parents of many of the young people in Memphis.
Yeah,
So a lot of people knew these people. So when King came back to have a rally in support of them, which is why he returned to Memphis, he had a huge amount of support. One of the most beautiful moments in the film is when he goes back to the big place where he delivered his speech.
yeah,
And for the first time, Sam chose to use all of that film, not just him delivering I've been to the mountaintop, but what he does afterwards and the sweep of the camera to the audience. So we get the audience response, something we rarely see.
that's right.
So the sanitation workers was the impetus for this. And I often think of that line in the film where he says when he's talking about how he didn't sneeze after he was stabbed by the woman, he's riffing on that thing. And
Yeah,
if I had sneezed, and he said, if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have come to Memphis to see a people rally. And the way he says that word rally is so beautiful because I think that same sentiment is what saved the Lorraine Motel afterwards.
yes.
Led by Army Bailey, the people rallied in exactly the same spirit as he captured in his words that evening.
That's exactly it. And we are at the end of this conversation. If I had sneezed, is another thing that stayed in my mind if I had sneezed. So I thank you both. Congratulations again for your award, Sam. Congratulations to both of you for having made this movie and being at Tribeca. And see you next Saturday, 12:30 p.m. on Spectrum channel 1993 and on my YouTube channel, My Harlem Portraits, for all the past episodes of My Harlem Portraits. Thank you.
Thank you.